Great. Mr. Reynolds, this is the time for your initial appearance. You were here this morning on charges of kidnapping. That is a felony offense. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have the right to be represented by an attorney, and it is ordered appointing. Oh, is it the public defender or? All right. We haven't received the information from the Office of Court Appointed Counsel. We're going to appoint the Public Defender's Office for today's purposes. And you do have counsel seated with you for today's hearing. We are going to determine your conditions of release this morning. I have reviewed the interim complaint. I have also reviewed information provided by pretrial services, which lets me know whether there's any prior felony history. I'm not sure if that background noise is coming from jail or if someone else isn't muted. Okay. And it also lets me know about your ties to the community, including employment, references, and their assessments and recommendations. Finally, I have reviewed the state's recommendation, the prosecution $50,000. Would the state like to be heard further?
Yes, Your Honor. $50,000 plus a pretrial services if he is released. This particular offense that is alleged is very, very concerning. Just given the occupation of the accused and the power dynamics between him and the victim, there's indications that this might have happened before.
Silence. Then, a single sound. A doorbell camera activating in the dead of night. A timestamp flickers onto the screen. January 31st, 2026, 11:47 p.m., Catalina Foothills, Tucson, Arizona. There is a neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona that sits in the shadow of the Santa Catalina Mountains. It is the kind of neighborhood where people know their neighbors, where garage doors close at dusk, and where nothing is supposed to happen at night. Nancy Guthrie had lived in the Tucson area for more than 50 years. Born Nancy Ellen Long on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wayne, Kentucky, she had built a life in the Southwest, raised children, grown old gracefully, and become the kind of woman her entire community adored. She was 84 years old. She needed daily heart medication to survive, and she was, by every account of everyone who loved her, as sharp as a tack. She had spent the evening of January 31st the way she loved to spend evenings, surrounded by family, dinner, games, laughter. Her daughter dropped her off at her home at approximately 9:30 p.m. The garage door closed behind her. That was the last time anyone who loves her saw Nancy Guthrie. What happened in the hours between 9:30 p.m. that Friday night and the moment Nancy's family discovered she was gone would ignite one of the most gripping, most disturbing, and most complicated kidnapping investigations America has seen in years. What happened inside the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the very agency tasked with finding her, would make everything even more chilling. The night Nancy vanished, she did not show up for church. The morning of Sunday, February 1st, 2026, began like any other Sunday in Tucson. Bright, quiet, the kind of desert morning that feels like peace itself. But Nancy Guthrie did not show up for church. That was not like her. Her family knew it immediately. They went to check on her. What they found at that house, what was waiting for them on that porch, would change everything. Blood. There was blood on the front porch, not a drop, not an ambiguous smear. Blood. Enough to stop every person who saw it cold. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos would later confirm what investigators had quietly suspected from the moment they set foot on the scene. The blood had been forensically tested. It belonged to Nancy Guthrie. And there was other biological evidence at the property. Evidence from someone who was not Nancy. and not anyone in her family. Evidence being analyzed by laboratory technicians as weeks ticked by. Sheriff Nanos did not mince words at his first press conference. He believed Nancy had been abducted. The FBI was brought in almost immediately, a recognition of the severity and the national profile the case would rapidly assume. Because Nancy Guthrie is not just an 84-year-old woman from Tucson, she is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognizable faces in American science television. And within hours of Nancy's disappearance being reported, the story wasn't just local news anymore, it was everywhere. But for the investigators on the ground, the Pima County Sheriff's detectives, the FBI agents flooding into Tucson, none of that noise mattered. What mattered was the timeline. Nancy's garage door had closed at 9:30 p.m. on January 31st. At exactly 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, her doorbell camera went offline. Between those two timestamps, 4 hours and 17 minutes, something had happened to Nancy Guthrie. And someone had made sure the camera would not capture what came next. There were no witnesses, no screams reported, no suspicious vehicles logged. The neighborhood had slept through it all. The ghost on the porch. Armed, masked, and he knew where the camera was. For the first 11 days of the investigation, investigators faced a technological wall. Nancy Guthrie had a Google Nest doorbell camera, but she had not subscribed to cloud storage. That meant footage was not automatically backed up. When the camera went offline, what it had recorded went dark with it. The FBI went to work. They contacted Google. They requested whatever could be recovered from backup servers, data that wasn't supposed to exist. And after days of technical forensics, they got something back. On February the 10th, 2026, the FBI released footage that changed the case entirely. The clip showed an armed individual approaching Nancy Guthrie's front door. He was masked, a ski mask covering his face. He wore gloves. He carried a black backpack, and he was looking directly at the camera, not with the casual glance of a stranger, but with the deliberate focus of someone who knew exactly where the lens was. Someone who had planned for this. 2 days later, on February 12th, authorities released additional detail. The suspect was estimated to be between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. He had a black mustache visible beneath the edge of his mask. He was wearing a specific backpack, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker pack, a private label brand sold exclusively at Walmart. The holster was even more striking to investigators. The suspect was visibly armed, and the holster he wore had, according to Sheriff Nanos, some, quote, pretty unique characteristics. Law enforcement began canvassing gun stores across Tucson and the surrounding region, trying to match it. Investigators noted a detail that would generate enormous online discussion: what appeared to be a ring on the suspect's hand. There was also something else on the footage, something that sources say was captured before February 1st. In the weeks leading up to Nancy's abduction, the same masked figure had reportedly appeared on her property camera, a casing, a reconnaissance mission. This was not impulsive. This was planned meticulously by someone who had studied Nancy Guthrie's home, her camera placement, her routines, and had waited for the right moment. The FBI had now received over 13,000 tips from the public. They were running a 24-hour command post, screening every lead, cross-referencing every data point. Agents had issued subpoenas for phone records. They were pulling surveillance footage from gas stations, restaurants, and intersections across Tucson. The digital net was widening with every passing hour, and yet no name, no face, no arrest. The ransom chaos, real notes, fake notes, and a California conman. We believe 2 of those notes are real. Within days of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, the case was already attracting exactly the kind of predatory attention that investigators dread. Ransom notes began arriving at media organizations, at law enforcement through digital channels. On February 2nd, a Tucson television station, KOLD-TV, received a ransom note that included a demand for a specific amount of money and a Bitcoin wallet address. The deadline, 5 p.m. on February 9th. The demand, $6 million. Then, Harvey Levin, the founder of TMZ, claimed to have received not one but two separate letters, one claiming Nancy was alive, scared, and aware of the demands being made, another that said this would be the only communication. None of this could be verified. The Pima County Sheriff's Department said it was aware of the notes and was forwarding everything to investigators. FBI Special Agent in Charge Hythe Janke confirmed publicly that law enforcement was aware of multiple ransom notes and that at least one had been determined to come from an imposter. That imposter had already been arrested. His name was Derek Kallela, a 42-year-old man with ties to Los Angeles. Federal prosecutors charged him with posing as Nancy's abductor and sending a ransom text message directly to Annie Guthrie, Nancy's eldest daughter and her son-in-law. Court documents were clear. Kallela played no physical role in the kidnapping. He was an opportunist, a man who saw a family in agony and tried to profit from it. This was not Kalella's first brush with fraud. Back in October 2025, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office had named him among 13 county employees charged with stealing more than $430,000 in unemployment benefits between 2020 and 2023. He was already a man in legal trouble. And he chose to make it catastrophically worse. Kallela was arrested. He would face federal charges, but his arrest created a problem for the investigation. Not a solution, because now the public was uncertain. Which notes were real? Were any of them real? Was someone genuinely holding Nancy Guthrie and demanding payment, or was this entire ransom dimension a fabrication? Savannah Guthrie herself, in a rare and emotionally raw interview with her Today colleague Hoda Kotb weeks later, addressed this directly. She said the family had received multiple notes, and that most of them, in her understanding, were not real. But two of them, two that the family had actually responded to, she tended to believe were genuine. Two notes that could mean Nancy is still alive. Two threads that the family has chosen to follow into the dark. Warrants, raids, and dead ends. We had probable cause. A judge agreed, we went in. The investigation moved with urgency, and at times with the kind of high drama intensity usually reserved for television. On February the 10th, a person of interest was detained following a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona, roughly 60 miles south of Tucson, closer to the Mexican border. Almost simultaneously, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI executed a search warrant on a property and vehicle in the same area. By the following day, the person had been released. Sheriff Nanos confirmed not involved. Then came February 13th, a Friday night that briefly sent shockwaves through the national media. A Pima County SWAT team and the FBI moved on at residence in the Catalina foothills, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's own home. It was a dramatic operation. At least 4 people were detained. A Range Rover was stopped in the parking lot of a Culver's restaurant nearby and towed away. Sources reported the stop was directly connected to the search warrant. FBI vehicles swarmed the neighborhood. Cameras from every major network captured the commotion. By the next morning, all 4 people had been released. No arrests, no sign of Nancy. Sheriff Nanos would later explain the legal logic behind the operation. Investigators had believed they had probable cause. That probable cause had been reviewed by the U.S. attorney, the county attorney, and a judge, a magistrate who had issued the warrant. They had executed their legal duty. The leads simply hadn't produced what they hoped. The gloves found nearby had initially seemed like a breakthrough. They appeared to match the gloves worn by the suspect on the doorbell footage. But DNA analysis told a different story. The DNA on the gloves led investigators to a local restaurant worker who, Sheriff Nanos confirmed, was not considered part of the investigation. Another door closed. The investigation had now generated between 40,000 and 50,000 combined tips between the FBI and the sheriff's office. DNA from an unidentified individual collected at Nancy's property remained under laboratory analysis, multiple profiles being cross-referenced, refined, and compared. Genetic genealogy options were being explored, including databases like Ancestry and 23andMe. Google was still attempting to extract additional footage from Nest cameras on the property, a technically complex process that the company announced it was actively working on as late as February 18th. The investigation was vast. It was aggressive. And publicly, it appeared stalled. The sheriff under fire. The damage to his reputation could be permanent. From the earliest days of an investigation, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos was the public face of the search for Nancy Guthrie. He held press conferences. He appealed directly to the kidnapper on camera. Just give her up. He stood up for the Guthrie family when online speculation turned cruel, issuing a public statement clearing them of any suspicion and adding, "I'm not going to sit in silence when others are attacking the innocent." In many ways, Nanos was doing what sheriffs are supposed to do, but critics, including former FBI officials who were tracking the case, began to accumulate a list of concerns about how the investigation was being managed. The crime scene had been released to the media before all forensic work was complete. Blood evidence, later confirmed to be Nancy's, had been accessible to journalists, compromising the sterile chain of custody investigators require. The delay in securing Google's doorbell footage, the seeming absence of cadaver dogs, a decision that a retired canine officer publicly said defies logic. The fact that civilian search organizations, including the United Cajun Navy, had offered to deploy a full search operation and reportedly received no response from the sheriff's office. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who had been providing expert analysis throughout the case, did not soften her verdict. The damage to the sheriff's reputation, she said, could be permanent. Sheriff Nanos was now facing something beyond the pressure of an unsolved kidnapping. He was facing a recall effort, a formal campaign by constituents who had lost confidence in his leadership of one of the highest-profile investigations in Tucson's history. He continued to insist his team was working around the clock. He told NBC Nightly News that investigators believed they knew why Nancy Guthrie's home had been targeted, a tantalizing statement he declined to elaborate on publicly. He did not rule out the possibility that the kidnapper could strike again. The White House had weighed in, posting about Nancy Guthrie on social media and urging the public to come forward. President Trump had personally called Savannah Guthrie on February 4th, expressing hope for her mother's safe return. This case had reached the highest levels of American government, and still, no arrest, no identified suspect, no Nancy. But something was about to happen inside the very department leading the search that would send shockwaves through the investigation and raise questions that no one in Tucson was prepared to answer. The deputy, a bombshell inside the department. It is the same sheriff's department running point on the Nancy Guthrie case. On Thursday, March 26, 2026, nearly 2 months after Nancy Guthrie vanished, the Tucson Police Department made an arrest. Not an arrest in the Nancy Guthrie case. Something else entirely. Something that would immediately shake public confidence in the department conducting her search. Travis Reynolds, a 22-year-old deputy with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, was taken into custody and charged with 1 count of kidnapping. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed the news within hours. Reynolds had been terminated. He no longer worked for the department. The Tucson Police Department, which had conducted the arrest, confirmed the investigation was still active and ongoing. But when the details of the allegations against Reynolds became public, when the interim complaint was obtained and read, the reaction was swift and it was visceral. According to the complaint, Reynolds was on duty and transporting a female detainee to the Pima County Jail when the incident allegedly occurred. The woman was in handcuffs. She had never been arrested before. She did not know the procedural steps. She was confused about why the process was taking so long. She could see other officers coming and going with their arrestees, but Reynolds kept her in the house vehicle. According to the complaint, Reynolds called her hot. He shared a vape pen with her. He told her he could help with her case. And when she asked how, he allegedly told her he would not go to court. He suggested they could go to a hotel and have sex. He then showed her sexually explicit videos. When the woman asked to be taken inside the jail, Reynolds refused. He eventually removed her from the vehicle and told her to expose herself before he would bring her inside. Jail surveillance footage reportedly confirmed parts of the victim's account. When investigators questioned Reynolds, his answers were chilling in their own way. He said he may or may not have shown the woman explicit material. He said he may or may not have discussed sex with her at a hotel. At his initial court appearance on March 27th, prosecutors told the judge the allegations were, in their words, very, very concerning, given Reynolds' position of authority and the power dynamic between a law enforcement officer and a handcuffed detainee. They told the court the incident may have happened before. The alleged victim was, prosecutors said, very afraid of Reynolds. The judge set his bond at $200,000. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for April 6, 2026. Reynolds had no prior criminal history, his defense told the court. He was a lifelong Arizona resident. He was 22 years old. He had been working for the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the same department that has been running the Nancy Guthrie investigation since before she disappeared. The connection question: is Travis Reynolds linked to Nancy's case? Wrong MO, wrong victim type, but the public wants answers. The moment Travis Reynolds' arrest became public, the internet did what the internet does. Social media users began comparing Reynolds' physical description to the masked man captured on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera. His height, his build, his connection to the very department conducting her investigation. Some pointed out that Reynolds would have had intimate knowledge of how the Pima County Sheriff's Department operates, what they were looking for, which neighborhoods they were monitoring, how warrants get issued. One ex-user wrote simply, "This could seriously impact the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's abduction." But former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, the same analyst who had been tracking both the Guthrie investigation and the department's handling of it, addressed the question directly and definitively. Her verdict: Reynolds is not Nancy Guthrie's abductor. Her reasoning was methodical. The modus operandi, the method of operation, was completely different. The person who took Nancy Guthrie conducted months of surveillance, approached her home in the dead of night with military-style precision, disabled her camera, and executed a kidnapping that has produced 0 forensic arrests after nearly 2 months of federal investigation. That requires sophistication, patience, and planning on an entirely different scale. Reynolds, according to the allegations, abused a position of immediate authority in a spontaneous, impulsive way. He saw an opportunity and, allegedly, took it. That is not the behavioral profile of the man on Nancy's porch. Coffindaffer also pointed to the physical differences. The body type, visible in the doorbell footage, the specific gun and holster carried by the masked man, as inconsistent with Reynolds. And critically, the type of victim. Nancy Guthrie was an 84-year-old woman targeted for what investigators believe was a deliberate, premeditated reason. That does not match the opportunistic pattern alleged against Reynolds. When asked whether Reynolds had any role in the Guthrie investigation prior to his termination, whether he had access to case files, whether he had worked the scene, officials declined to comment. That silence, for many following this case, was its own kind of answer. What the FBI knows, and what they're not saying. They know why that house was targeted, they're just not telling us. Here is what we know the FBI knows. They know why Nancy Guthrie's home was targeted. Sheriff Nanos said it directly to NBC Nightly News. Investigators believe they understand the motive. He did not say what that motive is. He did not rule out that the kidnapper could strike again. Those two facts, placed side by side, suggest investigators believe this was not random, and that the person responsible may have a pattern or a plan that extends beyond one 84-year-old woman in Tucson. They know the suspect's approximate height and build. They have his image. They have footage from the night Nancy disappeared, recovered by the FBI from servers that weren't supposed to have it. They have DNA, biological evidence collected at the property, evidence from someone who is not Nancy and not anyone close to her. That DNA is being analyzed. Genetic genealogy options are being pursued. They have the holster. They have the backpack. They have what investigators believe may be a ring visible on the suspect's hand. Each of those items is a thread. In kidnapping investigations, threads converge. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer made a notable observation in early March 2026. The decision by the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI to refuse offers of help from civilian search groups, including the United Cajun Navy, could, in her view, signal that investigators are further along in the investigation than they have publicly revealed. When law enforcement doesn't want outside groups muddying the water, it sometimes means they know where they're going. Former FBI Special Agent Harry Trombitas told Yahoo News that Savannah Guthrie's decision to return to The Today Show on April 6, 2026, to use her platform as what she described as her purpose right now, was likely coordinated with law enforcement. A move designed to humanize Nancy, to keep the pressure on the kidnapper, to reach the person in this country who hasn't yet heard the name Nancy Guthrie and might be the one who breaks the case open. And there is a reward, not just the FBI's $100,000, though that alone represents a staggering sum for a single tip. An anonymous private donor gave $100,000 to Tucson Crime Stoppers, bringing that program's reward to $102,500. The Guthrie family themselves have offered $1 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery. The total reward pool available to anyone with real information now exceeds $1.2 million. $1.2 million. And yet, no one has come forward, or no one has come forward in time. The family. Faith, fear, and a daughter in front of the camera. We will never give up on her. Savannah Guthrie has spent her adult life delivering news to the American public with composure and clarity. She has sat at that anchor desk through hurricanes, elections, tragedies, and triumphs. She has never been the story. On February 1st, 2026, she became the story. She stepped away from the Today Show immediately. Her brother Cameron, who spent his career in military intelligence, had known the moment they found their mother gone. This was not an accident. This was not a fall. This was not confusion. He had seen what a deliberate operation looks like, and this was one. On February 4th, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron recorded a video together and shared it with the world. They addressed the reports of a ransom note. They said the family was doing everything it could. They asked anyone with information to come forward. Savannah, composed and devastated in equal measure, looked into the camera and said to whoever was watching, "We have heard the reports. We are doing everything we can." The family asked for proof of life. They have not received it publicly. A week later, Savannah posted home movie footage of her mother. Nancy laughing, Nancy playing with grandchildren, Nancy being exactly who she was. The caption, "Our lovely mum. We will never give up on her." The family's public statement to local Tucson station KVOA pointed investigators toward a specific window of time that has received less attention than February 1st. The evening of January 11th, 2026, 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. They urged anyone who remembered anything from that night or from January 31st and the early hours of February 1st to search their memories. Someone had been watching Nancy for weeks. Someone had walked the neighborhood, noted the cameras, planned the approach. That someone may have been seen. Savannah Guthrie told Hoda Kotb in her first interview since the disappearance that she is reconsidering how her visibility, her platform, her fame, may have placed her family in danger. She was not bitter. She was not accusatory. She was a daughter trying to understand how the world she built became the world that came for her mother. She announced she would return to the Today Show on April the 6th, 2026. She described it as her purpose. Massive breakthrough. Where the case stands today, the search warrants tell us the investigation is active. The subpoenas tell us the digital net is widening. As of today, 58 days since Nancy Guthrie was reported missing, here is where the case stands. The Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI have not publicly named a suspect. No arrest has been made in connection with Nancy's disappearance. Her whereabouts remain unknown, but the investigation is not cold. It is not quiet, and those who know how federal kidnapping investigations work say the absence of public announcements does not mean the absence of progress. The FBI's digital operations alone represent a staggering reach. Cell phone records, subpoenaed from carriers, surveillance footage from a web of cameras stretching across Tucson, forensic analysis of DNA that could lead investigators to a name through genetic genealogy, a technique that has cracked cold cases decades old. Investigators are pursuing every thread with the resources of the federal government behind them. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has publicly speculated that an arrest may be getting closer, citing investigative decisions that, in her experience, only make sense when law enforcement believes it knows exactly who they're looking for. And now, inside the very department running this investigation, a deputy has been arrested on kidnapping charges, a deputy who was fired the same day. A deputy whose preliminary hearing is scheduled for April 6th, the same day Savannah Guthrie returns to television. Whether those events are related or not, the timing is not lost on anyone watching this case. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is under a recall effort. Its credibility has been questioned by federal investigators, former FBI agents, and the public. And yet, the investigation continues, because somewhere in the data, somewhere in the digital records, somewhere in the memory of a person who saw something and hasn't yet realized what it means, Nancy Guthrie is waiting to be found. If you are watching this and you know something, even something you think is small, even something you saw weeks ago that you dismissed, please call. The FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Tucson Crime Stoppers number is 88-CRIME. You can report anonymously, and if your information leads to an arrest, if your phone call is the one that brings Nancy home, you could receive a reward of more than $1 million. But more than the money, more than the reward, there is a family, a daughter who stepped away from her life, a brother who served his country and now can't protect his mother. A community that has grown a garden of yellow flowers on a porch that should never have seen blood, that is waiting. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She needs daily medication to keep her heart beating. Every single day that passes is a day her family cannot afford. Someone out there knows where she is. Someone out there knows who did this. It is never too late to do the right thing for Nancy. If you're new to this channel, Welcome. We cover the cases that deserve more than a headline. We sit with the details, we ask the hard questions, and we don't walk away until we have answers. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and let us know in the comments. What do you think happened to Nancy Guthrie? What do you think investigators know that they're not saying? Because this case is not over. And we will be here. Every update, every development, every breakthrough, until Nancy comes home. Stay with us.